Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I have a massive 2-in-1 review video for you. I'm going to be sharing Cracked Polish's makeup collection which launches tomorrow, but I'm also going to be sharing their donut shop collection that launched last month. And I will have a lot of comparisons as well, but it is mainly going to be for the pastels. As usual, I will have timestamps in the description box for everything and I'll save more of my thoughts for the end, but for now, let's just get into the swatches. So starting with the makeup collection, the first one we have is Liquid Blush, and this is described as a blush pink crelly. So this is actually the only crelly in the collection. The rest of them are creams, and you might be able to tell that by the application on the first coat here, where it was very easy to work with, very smooth to apply, and it did self-level really nicely, but as you can see, there is still some nail line because it has a more squishy, almost jelly kind of formula, but it's still very buildable and can become full coverage, which is what makes it a crelly. So here on two coats, I think it does look nice and definitely very passable. Like you could wear this in just two coats if you wanted, especially if you do have shorter nails. But there's just a little bit too much nail line than what I wanted for this shade, so I ended up doing a third coat and it wasn't 100% opaque, but basically there. Either way, I really love the color of this one. I just think it's so soft and romantic. Next we have Banana Powder, and this is described as a pastel buttercream yellow, which as you might know, I love pastel yellows, especially for the springtime, and this one is easily a new favorite. You might also know that yellows, especially pastels, are pretty difficult to formulate. They're usually either very thin and streaky, almost watery, or they're very thick and chalky and just kind of difficult to work with, but this was just perfectly in the middle. It was just so satisfying. Definitely a buttery smooth formula that was really nicely pigmented and built up perfectly for me in two coats. I just can't get over how cute this pastel yellow color is. It is so nice. So if you don't already have a pastel yellow, I highly recommend this one. Next up we have Color Correction, and this one is described as a pastel minty green cream. And I do want to say I feel like my camera is just kind of blowing out the color a little bit. It's almost looking a little bit too pastel or too white based than it actually is. But it really is this really beautiful, soft, minty green color that I ended up loving so much. This one also had another fantastic formula that was just so full coverage. It self-leveled really nicely. As you saw, the first coat alone was really impressive for such a light shade, and this one built up perfectly opaque for me in just two coats. And I would say it's a little bit more color accurate here on the second coat, where you just get more of that minty green color. It is just so pretty. The next polish we have is Twiggy Blue, and this one is described as a pale powder blue cream, and this one was another favorite of mine. It had another really lovely formula that again was just very easy to work with and apply. Not perfect coverage on the first coat, but it's an easy two-coater, but it really was the color for me on this one. I just love these super pastel sky blues that have this touch of powderiness to them, where it almost makes it like a cornflower blue. There's like a little bit of mutedness to it, but it's not grayed out by any means. It's still a very bright kind of pastel shade. I just think it's so perfect for spring. And the last cream in the collection is Lavender Jade, and this one is described as a bright lilac cream. This one is definitely the brightest from the collection, where the other shades are like true pastels. But even still, I feel like this one doesn't stick out too much. It just has like a noticeable punch of color, which I think is so pretty. And I was honestly kind of surprised with how much I enjoyed this one too, because normally I don't love these sort of pinky purple kind of shades, but this one is just so playful and so pretty for the springtime. It honestly was a surprise favorite because I just was not expecting to love it as much as I did. And no surprise, it had another super amazing formula that was perfectly opaque in just two coats. And rounding out the collection, we have Mascara Flakes, which is a black flake topper, and I am so obsessed with the name. Like, this definitely wins the best name for a black flaky topper, and it obviously fits the collection so well. So I'm applying it here in one coat over Lavender Jade, and you're gonna see it in one coat over the other creams as well. And again, I was kind of surprised at how much I ended up actually enjoying this one, because if you're familiar with the nail space, you know that there have already been a couple of other black flaky toppers before, and they're already a divisive kind of finish. So I'm somebody who isn't totally in love with the finish, where I think it's necessary to have all the variations, but I think this one is a really, really great contender. I loved how dense it was. I love the sizes of these. It just was so pretty. I just really enjoyed the speckled look that it gave the polishes. Obviously over the pastels, it kind of gives like Easter egg vibes, but I feel like this is such a nice topper. I know black flakies are not for everybody, but I really like this one. So I didn't get video footage of the Skittle that I wore, but here are some photos of it, and I just love how bright and colorful these are. I'm wearing 2 coats of each, by the way, and of course here's the same Skittle with Mascara Flakes on top, and I just thought it was so fun. And here is the collection lineup of the makeup collection. I thought it was so pretty. I just love a cute little rainbow lineup, and this one is just so perfect for spring. So getting into the donut shop collection, the first shade we have is Pink Velvet, and this is described as a light powder pink with an oyster pearl hue. No surprise, this was going to be one of my favorites from the collection because it is pink. I know the pearlescent effect isn't going to be for everybody, but I feel like the pearls that Cracked Polish has put out so far are a lot softer, or like more on the subtle side. You do see some brush strokes with them, but I just feel like they don't have the same pearlescent effect as other pearl shades that you see from mainstream brands mainly, where it's just so brushstrokey and not super flattering in my opinion. But you still do want to be careful with your application just to minimize the brush strokes as much as you can. This one was a little bit sheer, so I did end up doing a 3rd coat for this, and I just thought it looked so pretty. I don't know, maybe it's the theme, but I'm totally getting all the glazed donut vibes. I love it so much. Next we have Old Fashioned Champagne, which is described as a champagne rose gold with an oyster pearl hue. So if you've watched my favorite color series, you know that I love a good rose gold polish, but I was a little bit iffy on this one, where I do like it, but it's just not one of my favorites from the collection. As I'm sure you're able to tell, this definitely leans more on the peachy side of rose gold, but I do think the color is still really flattering, and I don't know if I would really call it a neutral exactly. Like maybe it's a little too dark to be my perfect neutral shade, but there's something about the tone and color of this one that I think can really work for like a neutral nail, but a little bit more sparkly. I also found that this one was slightly more pigmented than the last shade, so I got more fuller coverage on 2 coats for this. Up next we have Cinnamon Sugar Crumb, and this one is described as a frosted beige with an oyster pearl hue. I would say that this one is another favorite from the collection for me. It's just like a perfect neutral. This one had another really great formula that was very full coverage on the first coat. There was just some light spots or patchiness, but it got nearly fully opaque on just 2 coats alone, which I thought was really impressive considering how light this shade was. I'm not sure what happened with the Pink Velvet shade, if I just did thinner coats or if I happened to do thicker coats for this one, but I was kind of assuming this was going to be a 3-coater, but I think it looks amazing on 2 coats alone. I also definitely think this one was the least pearlescent of the collection. It still has that kind of frosted glazed look to it, but it just wasn't as brushstrokey or streaky as the other shades, even though those already were on the subtle side. So I think that's a plus for this one. Next up we have Cashmere Cake, and this is described as a taupe gray with an oyster pearl hue. So I know on first glance this might look really similar to the last shade, but there definitely is a noticeable difference in the undertone of the polish, where this one is a little bit more gray toned, definitely very taupey compared to how beige the last one was. And I don't know if it's just me, but the shimmer in this one also looks a little bit more blue than the other shades, where it's like a little more silver. So either way, say a really interesting color combination for the shade. Formula-wise, this one ended up reminding me of Pink Velvet, where again, it's kind of more on that pearly side, so you have to be careful with your application. You want to paint as smooth and as straight as possible to kind of minimize the brush strokes that you get, but it was a little bit sheer on 2 coats, so I personally think this one looks better in 3, where it's just a little bit more opaque. Then we have Boston Cream Puff, which is a warm chocolate brown with an oyster pearl hue. And sadly, this ended up being my least favorite from the collection, which was so unfortunate because I really love Boston cream donuts. And I also do generally like fudgy, dark chocolate brown polishes. But I don't know, there was something about the undertone of this polish that I feel like wasn't really the most flattering for me, or at least just not one that I personally like on myself. Even though it's described as a warm brown, I feel like it's maybe just a little too yellow or maybe orange leaning. Either way, that's just a personal preference thing. Formula wise, this one definitely had the best formula, where it was very pigmented and full coverage on the first coat. Not quite a one coater, but almost there. And rounding out the donut shop collection, we have Space Glaze, which is described as an icy steel gray with an oyster pearl hue. So at first, I was pretty confused by the inclusion of a gray polish. It just wasn't giving me donut vibes, even though I love like the name and, you know, it's definitely very futuristic. It just wasn't really fitting the theme in my mind, but Monique did include a photo of chocolate glazed donuts as a part of like the mood board for this collection. And in comparison to some of the other donuts, I was like, okay, I can kind of see that like sort of gray look. So I get it. Maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think the shade is still a really cool one. I found that the shimmer in this also reminded me of Cashmere Cake, where it's like a little bit more on the blue side, but it was still opaque in 2 coats. And here is the collection worn as a Skittle. Well, minus Space Glaze, I just thought that these 5 polishes were super cohesive. They really look like perfect neutrals with a little bit of shimmer. And here is the Donut Shop collection lineup. I definitely loved the first 4 polishes the most, but I still think it's a fun collection overall. So finally, getting into the comparisons, we're starting with the makeup collection. The first shade, Liquid Blush, immediately reminded me of Olive's Amaryllis from last year's spring collection, but it's a little bit lighter, and so I wanted to also see this next to Morgan Taylor's Tidy Touch from this year's spring collection. And while these might look pretty similar in the bottle, Tidy Touch is definitely a lot darker, especially once you see it on the nail. So definitely no dupes here. Amaryllis is a little closer, but again, just a little bit lighter, more white based, while Liquid Blush is a little bit more neutral leaning. Either way, I still love all 3 of these pinks, and I feel like they would make a great Skittle. Then for banana powder, I wanted to quickly show this next to Holo Taco's Butter Me Up from the recent Cookies and Crumbs bundle. That one, as you can see, is a lot lighter, even more of a white based pastel with a little bit of warmth too. So for actual comparisons, I did want to show this next to Olive's Sunshine, which sadly has been retired. It was easily one of my top favorite pastel yellows, and so I really wanted to see if banana powder would be a good dupe for that one. And another similar yellow in my collection is Mooncat's Eternal Sunshine from the Technicolor Dreams collection. Just for reference, Holo Taco's Banana Medicine is a nice yellow, but it's not as pastel as these. So here on the nail, I'm wearing 2 coats of each, and Olive's Sunshine is definitely pretty similar to banana powder. I feel like it's just a smidge darker or maybe even warmer. So if you did miss out on that shade, I highly recommend banana powder. Mooncat seems a little bit lighter and also has the worst formula of the 3. Next, for color correction, I had to show this next to Holo Taco's Crime and Punishment from last year's Pastel Don't Tell bundle. It's another similar minty green, but obviously Holo Taco's is much more vibrant, not the typical white-based pastel. So the closest color that I had in my collection was Sinful Colors aPEAsing, which I put the little coffin next to it because I have not seen Sinful Colors in stores in so long. So I really don't know how easy it would be to find this shade anymore. It's one of my absolute favorite mint greens, and so I was kind of hoping that color correction would be a dupe, but it's unfortunately a little too light for it. And lastly, I wanted to show this next to Spring Sprout, which is another green from Cracked Polish. This one is described as a glowing jade green packed with green micro shimmers. So it's obviously not a cream, but even aside from that, Spring Sprout is more sheer, where on one coat it is sheer enough that I think you could potentially use it as a topper if you wanted to, but I do think it builds up really nicely. It has this really gorgeous green color that's so fresh and minty, but not as minty as color correction. Next for Twiggy Blue, I wanted to show this next to Holo Taco's Too Good to Be Blue, which is another sky blue pastel, but you can see that one's more of a true sky blue and not as powdery as Twiggy Blue. Another shade for reference would be Essie's Ride the Soundwave, which again is another bright sky blue kind of pastel. So you can see just how cornflower leaning Twiggy Blue is, but I feel like it's almost maybe a little periwinkle. So I did also want to show this next to Olive's Jeannie, which is definitely the lightest periwinkle that I have, but as you can see, there's just a little too much purple in it. Twiggy Blue is definitely a blue shade, but just more powdery. So I thought maybe the closest shade that I had in my collection was Mooncat's Sabertooth, which is a shimmer, but I thought the blue base would be more similar, but it ended up being totally different. So Twiggy Blue is surprisingly very unique to my collection. It's kind of a chameleon because next to these cornflowers or periwinkles, it looks like a true sky blue, but then next to the sky blues like you saw before, it looked more cornflower-like. Definitely beautiful either way. Then for Lavender Jade, I wanted to show this next to Mooncat's Insomniac from the Technicolor Dreams collection. I thought this was going to be a dupe, but as you can see, Insomniac is much more purple leaning. But the closest shade that I had in my collection was Essie's In the Universe from last year's spring collection. This one is more of a true like orchid pink color, while Lavender Jade is more purple based. I think on camera they're picking up a little bit more similar than they actually are, but in real life it's easier to tell that Lavender Jade is more like purple and Essie's In the Universe is more pink, so they definitely are similar but not dupes. And of course for Mascara Flakes, I had to show this next to Holo Taco's Black Flake Taco, which recently came out in the Cookies and Crumbs bundle. These are both black flakies in a clear base, and while they both have a very similar mix of the smaller kind of shape, the obvious difference is that Holo Taco's features these larger and more irregular flaky pieces, so definitely not dupes. And the other comparison obviously is to Cirque Colors Spotted, which is their black flake topper in a clear base. These are a little bit more similar just because Spotted doesn't have those super large irregular flakies like Holo Taco does. These are generally on like the smaller side, but I found that this was a little bit more sparse, and I don't know if you could tell, but the base is also slightly tinted. At least it is in my bottle. Then for the donut shop collection, starting with Pink Velvet, I wanted to show this next to Kissing Cupcakes, which was from the very first collection that Cracked Polish released. This has a similar, almost pearly kind of finish, but it's obviously much more of a hot pink base color. I think color-wise, a closer pink would be Harry Squat Lobster from that very first collection. But while the bases might be more similar, Harry Squat Lobster is more of a true shimmer kind of finish, and the shimmer is pink as well, so definitely not dupes. I was also immediately reminded of Mooncat's Quicksand's Embrace from the most recent Songs of Sirens collection. That one's like this blushy, neutral sort of shade. So it has a similar vibe to the pinks and neutrals of this donut shop collection, but I would say it's closest to Pink Velvet, but obviously not a dupe. And lastly for the shade, I wanted to show it next to ILNP's Pink Suede from their Velvet collection. This one kind of has a similar vibe with the dusty rose pink color and a silvery kind of finish, but definitely not dupes. Then for Old Fashioned Champagne, I wanted to quickly show this next to Olive's Stardust, which is also described as a rose gold. So you can see just how peachy leaning Old Fashioned Champagne is. But yeah, I have nothing closer to it in my collection. Then for Cashmere Cake, I was immediately reminded of ILNP's Teddy from the Velvet collection. These two kind of have that similar sandy, beigey base color, but again, the shimmer particles are very different, and Teddy is also magnetic, so not exact dupes. Then for Cinnamon Sugar Crumb, because that was the lightest shade in the collection, I thought it would be fitting to show it next to Donut Spunk, which was Cracked Polish's first glazed donut kind of polish, but obviously that one is even lighter, so definitely not a dupe. I actually think color-wise it's a little bit more similar to something like ILNP's Sandbar, which is another beigey, nude kind of shade, but that one looks a little warmer and it's also a magnetic, so again, not exact dupes. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Cracked Polish's Donut Shop collection and their makeup collection. As always, I can't wait to hear what you think of these releases. Since I am a little late with the Donut Shop collection, let me know if you had already picked up a couple of the shades or if you were still kind of on the fence about them. Because I'm not gonna lie, I kind of was as well, because I'm not really the biggest fan of like pearly kind of polishes, but I do appreciate that these are trying to lean more into the glazed donut kind of look. And I feel like Monique just really nailed that, where it's not pearly, it's glazed, but maybe I'm just falling for the marketing for them. But even still, I love that they are just a line of neutrals, but with a little bit of fun and sparkle to them. I feel like it just kind of elevates the neutral a little bit more and just makes it more fun and exciting to wear. Then for the makeup collection, I was really impressed with these. And like I said so many times throughout the video, I ended up loving them so much more than I thought I was going to. I know pastels can be very hit or miss for people in the spring, and I generally do like them, but you know, sometimes you kind of get used to seeing them, and so you might kind of get like pastel fatigue or something. I can totally understand at first glance looking at them. They're not super exciting, but formula wise, they were amazing. I still really enjoyed the colors of them, where they were still bright, but still like white based pastels. I just thought they were so fun, so colorful, and just perfect for the season. And as far as Mascara Flakes go, again, I was so surprised at how much I enjoyed that one, because I was like, okay, like this is Cracked Polish's take on a black flake topper. It's not really gonna stand out compared to the other ones that we've seen, but dare I say, I like that one the most. I feel like it just has the perfect balance between the size of the flakes, the density, where some of the Holo Taco ones are just like a little too large. I mean, it definitely works for the ice cream look if that's what you're going for, but comparing it to Cirque's Spotted, for example, it's been a while since I've used that topper, and it definitely like works, but I feel like this one just looks better. If you do already have Spotted though, I don't think you need to get this one as like a replacement by any means, but if you don't have any black flake topper and you want one, I definitely think this is the better one. Again, just because of the density, the size of the flakies, how it actually looks and applies, not to mention the difference in size and price and all of that. So overall, I definitely am a fan of these past two collections, and I would love to know what your thoughts are if you're going to be picking up any of the pastels tomorrow. As a reminder, I am an affiliate with Cracked Polish, so if you do want to support me and my channel while shopping this brand, you can use my affiliate link down below. I do also have an affiliate code that I'll leave down there as well. Of course, no pressure to use anything, but a big thank you if you do. And of course, make sure to leave me any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!